If you fly one of these and don't have one of these, you might be getting a visit from one of these. So welcome to the Do-It-Yourself Dad channel and welcome to Tech Tuesdays, where we take a bit of tech on Tuesdays and talk about it on the channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about drones, drone piloting, and remote ID. Now, before we get into this, let's talk really quick about the FAA. Now, what the FAA is a governing body that controls everything that goes up in the air, aircraft. So this is considered an aircraft under the FAA. Now, a couple years ago, they required all pilots that were flying drones to register themselves with the FAA. That's because there's been a lot of incidents regarding drone pilots doing not so smart things with their drones. If you're a 107 waiver pilot, that falls under a whole other thing. We'll talk about that a little bit as well later on in the video. Now, what's happened recently is they've required remote identification. This is a little beacon that sends out a radio signal that allows the FAA to track what you've got in the air. The rules state that if you are a hobbyist pilot, meaning you are not making money off of flying your drone, you have to put a remote ID module on anything weighing over 250 grams. This thing comes in at a little over 500 grams, which means I need to have remote ID on it. Now, I'm a 107 waiver, so I've got to have it on anyway. We'll talk about that later. Now, this is the Holystone HS600. Now, this is actually a great little quad, and you can get this thing for a steal right now compared to a lot of other stuff on the market. So we'll be flying this thing in this video. Now, this drone obviously weighs much more than 250 grams. How much is 250 grams? Well, we've got a scale here to weigh some of my smaller stuff, but 250 grams is about the weight of 2 sticks of butter, which is not that heavy, which means chances are if you've got a hobby drone, you probably need to have remote ID. Now, some hobby drones already have remote ID built into them that you can activate. Some do not. The HS600 does not have it built in, so Holystone has come out with this. What's great about this is it doesn't have to be on this. It can be on anything. It comes with a little Velcro pad. You can stick it on whatever you're flying. Let me grab some of my smaller stuff, though, to show you what I'm talking about. And I'm back. So this is the DJI FPV. Now, this thing doesn't have its props on it right now. This thing also weighs well over 250 grams. It's kind of like a flying brick. This has remote ID built into it, so you can just flip it on and you don't have to worry about running a module. Now, some of the other stuff that I fly, I've got like this little guy. This little guy comes in under 250 grams. If you're flying this as a hobbyist, you don't need remote ID on this. If you're flying it and making money off of what you're doing, you do. So we're gonna see if this thing can lift this thing. I suspect it can. This is actually very light. Now, the last quad I have here is a tiny whoop. These things are tiny. That's why they're called a tiny whoop. You can see here, I don't think this is gonna try to lift it, but we're gonna give it a shot because technically speaking, if you are a 107 waiver pilot, even though this thing is well under 250 grams, you have to run remote ID on it. The other one that I have is this. This is the Hover X1. And if you've been around the channel, you've seen this thing. It's actually been a really popular video where I reviewed it, and I'm going to be using this a lot more for stuff. Now, what's great with this, it's Velcro. There's Velcro right there, so you can stick it right there on the back. And now, even if you're a 107 pilot, you're legal. But if you're a hobbyist, you don't have to worry about that. So you set this thing up in your app. So let me show you how you set this thing up in the app. Then we're gonna stick it on some of our quads and we're gonna go out in the field and fly. And I'm also gonna show you why I really dig that Holystone HS600. Now, like I mentioned before, you do have the setup for this thing in the app. It is the Drone Go 2 app, and we're gonna start by just firing this thing up. When you fire it up, you have a green light and a blinking light. Once the blinking light goes solid, it'll find it in the app, and then you can come in here and do your setup. Now, I've already set this thing up once, but we're gonna set it up again, and you can go in here, put your remote ID number in here, your operator ID, which if you're a 107 or you're in the EU, you would have to do your aircraft type. Now, I have seen comments on this thing saying, oh, this will only work with Holystone stuff. That is not true. You can actually go in here. You can see here, all these other models are listed. These are all Holystone models, but if you come down here to other aircraft, you can put in other aircraft, weight, UAS class, and everything else. So you can put these on any drone. It doesn't have to be a Holystone drone for it to work. Now, I'm gonna go off camera, reset this thing up with all my credentials, and then we're gonna go out and fly. Okay, we're at one of my local hiking spots, and yes, this is an area that we are actually allowed to fly. And as soon as I set up all my gear, my camera died on me, so I'm filming this with my phone. Thanks, camera. So we're gonna get the drone out of the box, get it set up, and get it in the air with the remote ID on it. So setup is pretty simple. We're gonna fly with the Holystone first, get this sucker out here, and get her set up. Now we're gonna start the process by powering up the drone. Followed by the transmitter. And then the last thing we're gonna do is fire up our remote ID. And once we see that blinking light, we know it's transmitting. Remote ID is just gonna go right here on the top of the drone. In the case of this quad, we would just wanna make sure that the props actually clear it so we don't wind up smacking things. And now here's some footage of the HS600 flying with that remote ID module on board. Now, it didn't really inhibit the flight characteristics at all, which is great. And like I had mentioned earlier before, the HS600 is my new budget camera drone. So if you're looking for something along those lines, leave me a comment down below and I'll make a video talking specifically about this drone and how you can get into drones on the cheap. But now that we've flown it on one of the larger drones, I want to try it out on one of my smaller drones and see how it holds up. So I've got it set up on the X1. I've never flown it on the X1 before. So the first thing I'm going to try just doing selfie mode. That's where it's just going to hold a hover right in front of me in case something goes wrong. It's too much weight. I can just grab it out of the air. So let's do that. And you can see here in selfie mode, it seems to be holding a hover just fine, even with that added weight on it. So let's try it now. Let's do a out and back. Land her in the palm of my hand first. Okay, so she's landed in the palm of my hand. I'm gonna switch modes. So there it goes. Looks like it is not really struggling at all, even with that extra weight. That is great news for this little thing because I do plan on using this thing commercially for YouTube. So it's gonna come right back. We're gonna do our normal landing procedure, which is we put our hand out underneath it and she lands. Now I would imagine with this compared to the Holystone, the Holystone is over 500 grams and this little thing is adding just a tiny amount of weight to it. In this situation, it's adding a considerable amount of weight over the initial all-up weight. So I'm gonna assume that this is going to decrease the battery life of this thing. The battery life on this is 10 to 12 minutes because it's what it's built for. It's just taking selfie shots like that. So I'm gonna assume this is gonna cut it down by a little bit just because it's having to hold the extra weight, but it does seem to be handling the weight on this thing just fine. Now, just for fun, I wanna see if this thing can lift this thing. I have my doubts, but I've been surprised before. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm actually going to attach this to the bottom of it because on this thing, I think on the top, to give it any sort of a fair crack at this, we're gonna have to put it on the bottom. Got my little piece of Velcro there. Got my remote ID module. Let's see if this works.
Welcome to OpenTX. Switch warning.
Nope, it's trying. So I guess we answered that question. You're not gonna be flying a tiny whoop with a giant remote ID module, but I kind of knew that going into it. Wanted to give it a shot just for fun. So I guess this video has actually been about two different things. It's been about this thing. This is the drone that I've been doing a lot of my recent filming with, the HS600 from Holystone, and then also their remote ID module. So let's start by talking about the remote ID module. Now, this thing comes in right now, these are selling for about $78. And For the price, there's different price ranges on these, and I've seen them cheaper, but as far as a user-friendly device, this thing is sweet. You can really quickly write and rewrite on it using your phone, so you can use this on multiple aircraft if you're not a 107, and it sticks right on there. They're really, really simple to use and fly, versus a lot of the other ones where you're having to run a separate battery or you're actually having to wire it into the electronics to give it power. It's an all-in-one module, so that's pretty cool on this part. I wish it wasn't $78, and I wish we didn't have to do it, but like they said, the few ruin it for the many, and there have been people that have done some knucklehead things with drones that have put us into this situation. I'm not going to get into my opinions on remote ID. I'd love for you all to hash out in the comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with the requirements for remote ID. Just try to keep the comment section civil. Now, when it gets to smaller stuff, there is a point where this is not going to work, but it's not going to work regardless, just because of the weight of this thing. If they want to build this into little stuff, they're going to have to really, really micro these things, but it's going to pull power. And when you can only get 2-3 minute flight times out of something like this, adding any additional weight is going to really cripple the small drones. So if you really actually want to be compliant with the rules, you might not be able to fly these commercially anymore. The bigger stuff like these did not really have a problem. I would just recommend, especially if you're doing smaller stuff, this stuff you can see I put the Velcro right on the nose because this thing's big, it can compensate. Little things like this, I would take the time to figure out exactly where the center of gravity is, which will probably be the middle point on it, and try to get this thing stuck as close to the middle point as possible so you don't have issues like this. Because once you put weight on one side of one of these things, the other motors are going to spin up harder to try to compensate for it. It could compromise flight characteristics, could compromise battery life. So those are my thoughts on the Holystone Remote ID module. I will have a link for that down below. Now the HS600, you may argue that there are better drones out there, and there are. This thing is a little bit older, but if you hunt around on Amazon, I've seen these things with coupons go for like 160 bucks, 170 bucks. I'll have a link, but if you're interested in one, keep checking back and see when they go on sale because you can get them really, really cheap. The battery life on these things, for what they are, very good. It's got a 4K gimbal on board, so it's got decent gimbal, decent camera. It'll do everything you want without all the extra bells and whistles that you're going to pay a lot of extra money for. So the HS600, great drone, great starter drone, and what's nice is because this thing has all the GPS not involved, anybody can fly it versus something like this, or something like this, or something like this. You need a little bit more piloting skills to be doing all the stuff that these things can do. These things are very, very simple to fly. So I will have links for all this stuff down below. I do hope this video helped you out. Please stay compliant with the rules. At least I have to say that. It is up to you what you want to do. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. So with that, I hope this video helped you out. Give it a great big thumbs up if you did. If you have any comments about the FAA, remote ID, registration, all that stuff, leave them down below. Let's have a good civil discussion in the comment section, please. And with that, thanks for watching.